Good evening. I regret very much that I cannot be with you, but I come to say to you, I'm deeply honored to be receiving the Thurgood Marshall Award. I was inspired to get in what I call good trouble. And when we would be arrested and taken to jail, it was the lawyers that pleaded our cases. I was inspired never to give up, never to give in, never to become bitter. And so I want to thank each and every one of you as members of the bar for standing up, for speaking out. My philosophy is very simple. When you see something is not right, not fair, not just, you have to do something. We need members of the bar more than ever before. We need your leadership. We need your vision. We need your dedication to defend the rights of all of our people, to help redeem the soul of America. I thank you for all that you have done and will continue to do to make our country a better place for all of our citizens. And I wish each and every one of you well. Good night.
Good evening. I'm Beth Wittenbury, the incoming chair of the Civil Rights and Social Justice section of the ABA. I'm pleased that my short message tonight is one of gratitude. I'm so grateful for all that our distinguished awardee, Dr. Clarence B Jones, has done to advance civil rights. And I'm grateful for all who participated in tonight's ceremony to make this a meaningful event for Dr. Jones. I'm grateful to all our sponsors, for without your generosity, this celebration and the charitable work of this section would not be possible. So thank you to Goodwin Proctor LLP, the Morrison and Forrester Foundation, Cotchett, Petra and McCarthy, Skadden, Clifford Law Offices, Jenner and Blanc, McDonald's, Paul M. Smith, Perkins Coie, the University of San Francisco Institute for Nonviolence and Social Justice, the University of San Francisco School of Law, Watchtel, Lipton, Rosen, and Katz, the World Justice Project, and each of the patrons and other supporters for your generosity and unwavering commitment to civil rights and social justice.
Thurgood Marshall left an indelible imprint on me as a young person. After my first year in law school, I found myself being a summer intern at the NAACP, and I interned for Thurgood Marshall, and he gave me a research project. He sent me to the library to get some legal backup for a position he wanted to argue. I go and I spend the entire day, and I sheepishly come back. And I say, with all due respect, Mr. Marshall, I didn't find anything in the library to support the argument which you plan to make. And he puts his glasses, puts his down, and he leans over and looks at me. He says, now, young man, you mean to tell me that in the entire history of American recorded jurisprudence, there's not one case? So I said, well, Mr. Marshall, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying I didn't find it. He says, oh, well, that I can understand. Then I suggest that you go back tomorrow and look again. And lo and behold, after careful, meticulous, resumed research, I found several cases to support the argument. That was the first personal experience I had with him.
Did we ever he appeared, folks immediately recognized a leader, recognized a person who could get things done, and then he recognized opportunities and seized upon them.
Yes, and it runs through the history of this award. Every single recipient is an inspiration in that way, and their selfless commitment to help people on the front lines of social change. I see that again woven through the individuals who have received this award over the years.
Thurgood Marshall, Martin Luther King Jr., and those people they inspired were committed to the pursuit of excellence, to be the very best that they can be. Thurgood Marshall took no prisoners. And Clarence Jones learned from Thurgood Marshall, you take no prisoners.
Good evening, and welcome to the 2021 Thurgood Marshall Award celebration. I'm Angela Scott, and this year I have had the privilege of chairing the American Bar Association section of Civil Rights and Social Justice. Like many of you, I'm disappointed that we didn't get to spend our year together in person. I always look forward to fellowshipping with my ABA colleagues as we engage in our important work. But I don't have to tell you that even though we've been virtual this year, we are at a crucial crossroads in our work with respect to civil rights, social justice, the rule of law, and even the very preservation of our democracy. Needless to say, we've been quite busy even while virtual. So tonight, we are gathered together to recognize Dr. Clarence B Jones, who embodies Justice Thurgood Marshall's aspirations and has much to teach us, especially now. Although we are not celebrating in person, I am heartened by your virtual presence. Your unwavering support of the section's work to protect civil rights, advance human rights, and achieve social justice is testimony to the country's resilience and our capacity for progress. I want to thank our Thurgood Marshall Award Selection Committee, chaired by past section chair, Wilson Adams Schooley. I especially want to thank our wonderful Thurgood Marshall Award Celebration Committee, who raised the all-important resources to hold this event and to continue our section's work. And I want to thank our newly created Thurgood Marshall Celebration Committee, who helped in the planning of this virtual event. Thank you also to our section director, Paula Shapiro, our associate director, Ali Kielsgaard, and our program associate, Ruchika Sharma, who make it possible for the section to truly stand and deliver for civil rights and social justice all day, every day. So now I'm going to turn it over to our hardworking Thurgood Marshall Celebration Fundraising Committee chairs, Paul Smith, Mario Sullivan, and Broderick Johnson. And our special guest, Marie Silla Dixon, Chief Diversity Officer and Senior Vice President of Raytheon Technologies, and Jonathan Greenberg, co-founder of the University of San Francisco Institute for Nonviolence and Social Justice. They will open the award ceremony shortly. But first, I'm honored to turn to my friends, ABA President Trish Rifo and ABA President-elect Reggie Turner, who will say a few words. Their support of the Civil Rights and Social Justice section has been unparalleled this year, and their leadership during these trying times has been incomparable. We are honored to have them with us today.
It is my great pleasure to join the ABA section of Civil Rights and Social Justice in honoring the career of legendary civil rights leader Clarence B Jones with the 2021 Thurgood Marshall Award. It might be said that behind every great person is a great lawyer. Mr. Jones's relationship with the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was and remains no exception. To appreciate the impact of our honorees' life work, I urge you to read, or hopefully reread, Dr. King's letter from a Birmingham jail. Mr. Jones played an instrumental role in the letter's creation as he smuggled clean paper and drafts to and from Dr. King's jail cell. As you read Letter from a Birmingham Jail, you'll recognize well-known words such as injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. But as with so much of Dr. King's body of work, his intellectual heft and moral force come through so much more clearly and urgently upon a thorough reading. We have Clarence B. Jones to thank for that and for all his contributions to securing civil rights for all. Thank you, Mr. Jones, for accepting this important honor from the American Bar Association. And thank you, Angela Scott, for your outstanding leadership of the section of Civil Rights and Social Justice. The section's leaders and staff have worked exceptionally hard to produce valuable programs and initiatives to engage our members in critical issues of law and justice, reaching more members than ever and strengthening the ABA's voice of lawyers everywhere for equal justice under law.
It is my pleasure to join in welcoming you to the 2021 Thurgood Marshall Award presented by the ABA section of Civil Rights and Social Justice. It is my honor to help recognize this year's recipient, a revered revolutionary in our profession, Dr. Clarence B. Jones, a legendary civil rights leader, advisor, and lawyer to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Dr. Jones played a pivotal role in many events in the civil rights movement, including assisting in the drafting of Dr. King's historic "I Have a Dream" speech. Many of us have benefited from the extraordinary legal and advocacy skills of Dr. Jones, and we are so proud to honor him with the Thurgood Marshall Award. I likewise pay homage to Justice Thurgood Marshall, a pioneer in the legal field with whom this award was so fittingly named almost 30 years ago. Let me also thank the leadership and staff of the ABA Civil Rights and Social Justice section, chaired by the incomparable Angela Scott. The section's work is invaluable and critically needed now more than ever. During a tumultuous year, the section did a remarkable job providing our members with an informative series of webinars, publications, and resources to keep us engaged and focused on the issues at hand. Thank you ever so much for your commitment to justice for all and your support of the ABA section of Civil Rights and Social Justice. Again, my sincere congratulations to Dr. Clarence B. Jones, a most deserving recipient of the 2021 Thurgood Marshall Award.
Thank you, Angela, for that very warm introduction earlier. I myself was honored to receive the Thurgood Marshall Award in 2010, and it's my pleasure to be here this evening with all of you who share a passion for civil rights and social justice, making sure that they're advanced and protected in this country. This award was created to honor Thurgood Marshall's own commitment to the cause of civil rights in the United States, and it's become our mechanism to honor similar long-term contributions made by members of the legal profession. This award truly epitomizes the mission and goals of the section of Civil Rights and Social Justice. Your support for this program and for the section funds our prolific work and is essential to sustaining all that we try to do, all we try to accomplish together as a community. Please consider making an additional charitable gift this evening by visiting ambar.org/donate-TMA, or just using the link on this page to help continue to provide free programs to our community of advocates nationwide. Thank you for the generous support you've already provided. And now it's my pleasure to turn things over to Broderick Johnson.
Good evening. It is a great honor for me to join the ABA's Civil Rights and Social Justice section for tonight's tribute to a great lawyer, a champion for civil rights, and on a personal note, a dear friend of my family and me, Attorney Clarence B. Jones. I'd like to take a moment to thank each of you, our virtual guests, for joining us in celebration of the accomplishments of Dr. Jones. Additionally, we owe many thanks to our sponsors. Without your generosity and support, events like these and the charitable work of this section would not be possible. So thank you for your support. And now, please welcome Mario Sullivan to say a few words.
I want to briefly tell you more about the important work that you support by attending tonight's celebration and by working with this section. This is the only ABA membership entity whose work is seen solely through the lens of protecting and advancing civil rights, social justice, and human rights. We gather experts in all aspects of civil rights, and we collectively fight for what we believe in. We need only look to recent events, the COVID-19 pandemic, and the resurgence of the Black Lives Matter movement, to see how we work to ensure that civil rights and social justice remain at the forefront of the national consciousness. In fact, if you visit our website, you will find an unprecedented amount of programming responding to these important issues of our day. Our goal is to nurture a sense of responsibility on the part of all lawyers, both personally and professionally, to help ensure and advance equal justice for all. As lawyers, we must all stand for liberty, justice, and the rule of law. Thank you for being a critical part of achieving this mission. Now, I'm very happy to turn it over to Marie Scylla Dixon.
Hello, I'm Marie Scylla Dixon, Chief Diversity Officer for Raytheon Technologies. As a civil rights attorney and America's first Black Supreme Court Justice, Thurgood Marshall lived a life of service and stewardship to the ideals of equity, inclusion, and opportunity. His legacy causes us to strive each day to make this world a bit fairer and freer for all of us. And today it's my pleasure to begin the presentation of the Thurgood Marshall Award. First, I would like to thank Paul, Beth, Broderick, and Mario, and our section chair, Angela Scott. This year's honoree, Clarence B Jones, exemplifies the living legacy of Thurgood Marshall. Mr. Jones was the personal counsel, advisor, draft speechwriter, and close friend of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. Dr. King described him as a man of sound judgment, deep insights, great dedication, and integrity. Today, it is our profound honor to celebrate and recognize Mr. Jones and his many accomplishments. To help continue today's presentation, I would like to give a warm welcome to Jonathan D. Greenberg, Director of the Institute for Nonviolence and Social Justice at the University of San Francisco. Jonathan has worked in close partnership with Dr. Clarence B. Jones since 2014. He co-founded the USF Institute for Nonviolence and Social Justice with Dr. Jones in 2019. And previously served as Senior Associate Director and Scholar in Residence of the Institute until Dr. Jones retired as Founding Director in December of 2020. Prior to joining USF, Jonathan taught negotiation, conflict resolution, diplomacy, and international law at Stanford Law School for 30 years as a lecturer in law, where he also served as the law school's director of international graduate studies and as a scholar in residence at the law school's Gould Center for Conflict Resolution. Welcome, Jonathan.
It is my great honor to introduce Dr. Clarence B. Jones, the 2021 recipient of the Thurgood Marshall Award from the American Bar Association. Largely working behind the scenes, Dr. Jones played a major role in the civil rights and Black freedom movements of the 1960s and beyond. And he has never wavered in his dedication to further the legacy of Martin Luther King Jr. In 1960, Dr. Jones was recruited to join the legal team defending Martin Luther King Jr. against false charges of tax fraud brought against him by the state of Alabama. From that point on, he served as legal counsel, strategic advisor, and draft speechwriter to Dr. King until April 4th, 1968, when Dr. King was assassinated in Memphis, Tennessee. There are countless examples of Dr. Jones's historic work with Dr. King. In this short introduction, I'd like to highlight just a few. As Dr. King's lawyer, Dr. Jones met Dr. King on a daily basis when he was incarcerated in Birmingham, Alabama in 1963. And he helped him to smuggle out and publish and disseminate the iconic letter from a Birmingham jail. Dr. Jones helped to negotiate a settlement with the city of Birmingham and the United States Department of Justice, desegregating Birmingham's lunch counters, restrooms, drinking fountains, and department store fitting rooms within 90 days, and requiring businesses to hire Blacks in stores as salesmen and clerks. In working partnership with Harry Belafonte, Dr. Jones coordinated with New York Governor Nelson Rockefeller and Chase Manhattan Bank President David Rockefeller to obtain financing to cover the bail costs to enable hundreds of nonviolent young protesters to be released from jail. Today, Dr. Jones is the only surviving member of the planning committee for the August 1963 March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom, where he worked closely with Bayard Rustin, A. Philip Randolph, and the young John Lewis. Dr. Jones drafted the first 7 paragraphs of Dr. King's iconic "I Have a Dream" speech, delivered at the Lincoln Memorial that day, and etched in our national identity and imagination ever since. Looking back, Dr. Jones believes that it was the ear training he received at Juilliard School of Music, enabling him to capture the unique rhythm and cadence of Dr. King's voice, that served as the most important foundation for his work as Dr. King's draft speechwriter. Everything Dr. Jones has done since his first assignment as a young lawyer defending Dr. King, through the founding and leadership of the USF Institute for Nonviolence and Social Justice, has been driven by common themes and motivations: a profound thirst for justice and equality, the conviction expressed by Frederick Douglass that power concedes nothing without a demand. It never did, and it never will. An absolute commitment to nonviolence as the path to social change. A fearless recognition of the fierce urgency of now. And the faith he absorbed from his dear friend Martin King, that hate can indeed be conquered through love. Thank you so much. I'm so honored to present Dr. Clarence B. Jones, the 2021 recipient of the American Bar Association's Thurgood Marshall Award.
Since the 1950s, I have been a good friend and brother and dependent on the legal knowledge, dedication, and commitment of my friend, Clarence Jones. He was always there, a voice of reason and clarity.
As the years have passed, I can't imagine the work that I've been able to do, the policies that I've been able to be a part of shifting. It's really because I've had such a great mentor. Dr. Jones, what a man. He refuses to accept no for an answer. He is insistent about the folks who he is mentoring, that we push harder, we push clearly, and that we are about the self-determination and freedom of our people. In my quest to be a part of something greater than myself, I can't tell you how his mentorship, how his shaping of my politics, how his insistence on me working 15 hours a day on an issue, because he's very clear, Latifah, we must win. We must fight harder than them. We must be better than the people who want to see people live in misery. We all deserve that kind of push, because what Clarence will say to you, the cavalry isn't coming, it's you. It's you and your responsibility to change the conditions.
Clarence was most famously Dr. Martin Luther King's counsel, in the legal sense, in the political sense, and in the personal sense. He helped defend Dr. King against a fraudulent tax prosecution brought by the state of Alabama. He successfully coordinated the defense of Dr. King and SCLC in the case that became New York Times versus Sullivan. Everyone knows that case as one of the most important free speech cases ever, but it was in fact integral to the survival of the civil rights movement in the 1960s by stopping efforts to bankrupt the civil rights movement through bogus libel lawsuits. He negotiated a key settlement with Birmingham and Dr. King that led to desegregation of department stores, restaurants, and hotels in the early 1960s there. But Dr. King trusted Clarence with much more than the law. He consulted Clarence for his wisdom, his ideas, and his words as well. Clarence helped draft the I Have a Dream speech, the most famous social justice speech of all time. Since Dr. King's death, Clarence continued to work as counsel and close friend to a who's who of social justice figures, including Muhammad Ali, James Baldwin, Harry Belafonte, Ossie Davis, and Ruby Dee, and Lorraine Hansberry. He was counsel, in short, not just to Martin Luther King, but to the civil rights movement.
Dedicated to furthering the legacy of Martin Luther King Jr. among a wide public audience and from generation to generation, Dr. Jones has been passionately engaged as a writer, public speaker, and teacher. He's authored 2 acclaimed books, What Would Martin Say? And Behind the Dream, The Making of a Speech That Transformed a Nation.
What a man. He's done so much, and I am so proud and honored to be in his corner.
Everybody has been blessed by his work and his faith and his contribution to making America the America of the dreams of the founding fathers and those continuing freedom fighters that are carrying on to this day. Thank you very much, Clarence. You are a blessing to this entire nation, and you are in the tradition of Thurgood Marshall.
As you have heard, we cannot learn enough from the sacrifices and the wisdom of those who came before us to pave the way for justice and equality. Whether it's the great Justice Thurgood Marshall or whether it's the great Dr. Clarence B Jones, our esteemed honoree this evening. Like those we've heard from, we want you all to benefit from his wisdom too, so that you can be inspired into using your talents to do the same. So to this end, I called on my friend Ronnie Chang to speak to Dr. Jones so we can listen in and learn about his significant role in achieving racial justice, equality, and so many liberties we take for granted today. You may not know this, but I met Ronnie Chang many years ago in an international human rights law program at Oxford. So yes, he is a comedian, but like us, he also cares deeply about these issues and chooses to use his platform to make a difference. So can all of you.
Hi, Dr. Jones. Thanks so much for speaking to us.
My pleasure, sir.
Very nice to meet you. First of all, I want to thank you for your time and all your work throughout your career. Thank you so much for fighting the good fight for all Americans, especially those who need it the most.
Thank you.
I'll just get right into it. When you went into law school and started your legal career, did you anticipate that you'll be using your legal skills on behalf of the civil rights movement?
Putting it bluntly, when I went from law school, I was interested, no civil rights, no criminal law. I was interested only in musical copyright law infringement and entertainment. That's all I was interested in. It was after I got out of law school and I foolishly responded to a call from a judge in New York who told me that Dr. King had been indicted by the state of Alabama for tax evasion. And he had respect for my legal skills, not so much for my musical clarinetist skills. But anyway, he says, I was living in California. And he says, I'm the chief counsel. I have 4 other lawyers working with me, but I really would feel very confident if you would take over the responsibility for doing the legal research for the defense team.
As someone who was around him all the time, could you, I don't know, kind of give us an idea of what he was like in day-to-day life, his energy?
I don't want to overstate the case. I wasn't around him all the time.
Sure.
I was around him a lot.
Mhm.
And so, you observe people. First of all, I observe things that maybe other people wouldn't see. Let's talk about the concept of fear and fearlessness. He was 5'7", 5'8", right? Now, I've been experienced in the North in which I'd heard, Negroes, as we refer to myself, talk about how bad they were, what they're going to do to the man, blah, blah, blah. They're going to kick the man's butt, Now, I'm not going to say to you, Dr. King would be the first to acknowledge that he had fear, but he was fearless. I mean, that's what impressed me about the brother. He was fearless. Now, I don't know whether he was fearless because he was crazy. I mean, I used to think he was fearless because he was crazy. I really did. I think that's just some crazy Negro preacher. And then I began to know that he's fearless because he really believes this. I mean, this is no joke. He really believed that there's nothing no human being can do to him to make him afraid. You have to believe in something. You have to believe in something that is so morally non-negotiable. It's got to be so deeply embedded in your soul that you can look at the world and say, bring it on.
Do you see any kind of key lessons from Dr. King's journey and the Black freedom movement and the anti-Vietnam War movement for our present day?
Power concedes nothing without a demand. The Black Lives Matter movement is a moral and political reflection of the legacy of Martin Luther King Jr. To the extent that the Black Lives Matter movement remains a disciplined, nonviolent movement, it will be like the capstone commemoration of the legacy of Martin Luther King Jr. He would look, when he, on April 3rd, when he was speaking in the Tabernacle in Memphis, Tennessee, and he said, I've been to the mountaintop and I looked over and I've seen, and I've seen the mountaintop. I looked over and I've seen the tips of the Black Lives Matter movement. I've seen what's going to come afterwards. And so that my young brothers and sisters who were involved in the Black Lives Matter movement, I appreciate that you get some moral and political nourishment from what we tried to do. And I look at what they have done and are doing, I look on it humbly. But I also look on it with the spirit of admiration to know there's no way in hell that the Black Lives Matter movement could be doing what they're doing today, but for the legacy of Martin Luther King Jr.
Do you have any advice for the younger people who are in law school and how they can practice law or use their legal skills to change and strengthen democracy and make our society more equitable and just? So this is for people who are currently in law school.
Look at law school pragmatically as you're developing the skill sets as a tool. Going to law school is like you're become a fine alchemist. Okay, it's a tool only. It's not something in and of itself. It's an investigative and evaluative tool to use for all the information that presumably you would get if you read history, and presumably if you listen. But going to, now if you say, oh, I'm going to go to law school because I want to make $1 million, okay, that's good objective. I mean, you know, that's I can't say that that's not an objective to pursue. But if that's your only objective, I'm going to say that when you get to law school, you're going to be an uneducated, wealthy millionaire. You also have to have a dialectically healthy respect and disrespect for the law.
I love that.
The first thing I thought when I heard I had gotten the award, I went on the internet and saw how many people by the name of Clarence Jones at 98 were still living. Because I figured it's got to be a mistake. I was able to drink from the well of the work of Thurgood Marshall, as so many other people in this country. I am ever so humbled. And I'm an imperfect vessel that has cracks in its armor, but that's all right. I'll take it.
There's no one in America who doesn't owe a debt of gratitude to you and the things you fought for and the things you continue to fight for. Thank you so much.
Thank you, but they owe a derivative debt of gratitude. The gratitude they owe is to the greatest person in the 20th century. I am a derivative beneficiary of having spent most of the 7.5 years from the second week in February until April 4th, 1968, working as his personal lawyer and draft speechwriter. This is a gift. If you took all of the wealth of Bezos and all of the wealth of, I don't know, Apple, all of the wealth of technology, and you set them at my feet and said, you can have all of this, Dr. Jones. You can have all of this in exchange for giving up those 7.5 years. And I would say, you don't have enough money, brother. There's not enough money in your checking account.
Thank you, Ronnie and Dr. Jones. What an inspiring and informative conversation. Dr. Jones, I want to stress again how grateful we are for you and for your work. It's funny how great people, such as yourself, are so humble and don't necessarily realize the significance of the influence they have on others. I hope you have enjoyed watching the tributes in tonight's program, and I hope you're aware, if you weren't already, that there are so many people who are grateful to you. People who have watched and admired your dedication, your perseverance, and your resilience up close and from afar. It is my hope that presenting this very award to Dr. Clarence B Jones inspires something in all of you who have joined us this evening. We are lawyers. I do not care what area of law you practice or whether you practice at all. I challenge you to make a difference in the advancement of civil rights, human rights, and social justice, however you see fit. We all have something to contribute. And frankly, now more than ever, we have a moral responsibility to do so. Dr. Jones is the right person to receive this award at this exact moment. In fact, we are at a unique crossroad in our country. We've seen a lot over the last 18 months that no longer afford you or anyone else the luxury of denying that racial inequality exists. And lawyers with integrity must be honest at this moment in time, and we must take action. Is there still a problem with racial inequality? Is there a problem with health disparities? Are we encouraging all eligible voters to be able to easily cast their votes because voting is quintessential to our democracy? Are we going to refuse to take for granted the democracy we claim to hold dear? Are we going to acknowledge that it is not okay for people to face unequal outcomes because of their race, gender identity, religion, sexual orientation, age, or disability? Are we going to refuse to keep being silent or nonchalant about these issues? Are we going to stop prioritizing other things and finally face and resolve the problems that continue to haunt certain segments of our society? If you are honest, you will answer each of these questions with a resounding yes. Regardless of your political affiliation or what you used to think prior to this collective international awakening, which highlighted these issues, you must be honest about your enlightenment now. The other thing that you must ask yourselves, regardless of your practice area, is whether you are doing enough to contribute to the solution. Dr. Clarence B Jones may have asked himself similar questions prior to committing and contributing to resolving racial inequality. Back during the heart of the civil rights movement, in a world where blatant racism was considered the norm, in a world where Black people were often told the time to act is soon or later, but not right now, in a world where the disenfranchised people, people of color, and others were told to wait, in a world where people who didn't experience hardships told those who do that things really aren't that bad, or we have other things to focus on right now, or change takes time. Trust us, just wait. Dr. Jones, alongside many others, decided not to wait. Instead, he decided to contribute what he could to the movement that consisted of direct action. If you lived back then, you may not have known his name, you may not have known how he contributed, and you may not have known his calling or his purpose. But if you're here today, you benefited from his hard work and his commitment to fairness and justice and equality for all people. Quite frankly, we are still benefiting from it. Dr. Jones, thank you again. Thank you for reminding us now more than ever that we need to revisit our past, study our history, and look to you, your contributions, and more to inspire us to do more. Your past demonstrates to us that we can work together and we can continue to progress toward a society that will truly represent justice and equality for all. Thank you, Dr. Jones, and congratulations on receiving the 2021 Thurgood Marshall Award.
In 2012, I was a recipient of Georgetown University's John Thompson Sr.'s Legacy of the Dream Award, presented to me at the Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts. I mention this because then I understood the connection between my work on behalf of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and the dream he shared with America at the 1963 March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom. This award by the American Bar Association surprised me because of the large, diverse number of earlier, presumptively more worthy recipients over a 90-year living landscape. I accept the Thurgood Marshall Award in honor of my domestic household servant parents, Mary Elizabeth Tolliver and Goldsboro Benjamin Jones. I accept this award in the honor of the Irish nuns who taught and cared for me at the boarding school for indigent colored boys and Native Americans, ages 6 to 14, 9 months a year. They taught us to be the very best that we could be. I accept this award in the honor of all those persons subsequently along the way of my 90-year-old journey, who encouraged me to pursue a life of personal and educational excellence. I accept this award especially in loving tribute to my mother. When she saw me, her only child, at the age of 10, get up from a chair in the kitchen where she was washing and drying dishes by hand, she snatched the towel from my hands that I had taken to help her, saying to me, and I quote, "Go sit back down on that chair, boy. The only thing I ever want to see in your hands when you grow up is a pencil and a dollar bill." Close quote. My domestic household servant parents would want me to accept this award in memory and in tribute to the courage of Denise and Oliver Brown and their children and other parents and children who endured the struggle to gain access to public school opportunities under the legal stewardship of Thurgood Marshall and the NAACP. I accept this award in gratitude for and in memory of Drs. Kenneth and Mamie Clark for their work in making possible the unanimous Supreme Court decision in Brown versus Board of Education. In honor of the great civil rights lawyers, Constance Baker Motley, Jack Greenberg, Derek Bell, Norman Amaker, all of whom I knew, and in honor of 4 young African-American girls murdered September 15th, 1963, in Birmingham, Alabama. I accept this award in tribute to Fannie Lou Hamer, Dr. Benjamin Mays, Mary McLeod Bethune, Dr. W.E. Du Bois, Frederick Douglass, Sojourner Truth, Elaine Locke, Dorothy Height, and others, and of course, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., just to mention a few. I accept this award in the name of all of those persons subsequently along the way of my 90-year journey who encouraged me to pursue a life of personal and educational excellence, to be the very best that I could be. I accept this award in gratitude for the meaningful lessons learned as a young 1957 summer intern for Thurgood Marshall, years before he became a federal judge, when I worked as a summer research assistant at the NAACP Inc. Fund in New York City. To those few named and so many more unmentioned here, I accept this award in their honor. I hope they will be proud of what I have tried to do over several decades to help somebody to make our country a better place in which to live. I owe an enormous debt of gratitude to my teachers at Palmyra High School in New Jersey, who recognized the talent and skill sets as a young person, studying and playing the clarinet, to facilitate my application to the Juilliard School of Music. At Juilliard, I developed not only to become an accomplished clarinetist, but the development of skilled ill training and musical memory that has enabled me years later as a lawyer and draft speechwriter for Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. to draft speeches for him that captured and reflected the accuracy of his cadence and substance of what he would likely say, not what I, as his lawyer, might say on his behalf, but what he would likely say or write, and the musical flow and rhythm of his voice. I also wish to accept my immeasurable gratitude to the Black Lives Matter movement for reminding our country that the minds and bodies of Black men and women are sacred and dear, in need of protection against the use of excessive force. The Negro's complaint, written in 1788 by William Cowper, remains poignant today, more than 230 years later. He wrote, "Fleecy locks and dark complexion cannot forfeit nature's claim. Skin may differ, but affection dwells in black and white the same. Were I so tall as to reach the pole, or to grasp the ocean at a span, I must be measured by my soul. The mind is the standard of a man, and all genders, living and dead." Again, thank you so much for this prestigious honor, and to the University of San Francisco, which enabled me to spend my last years at their prestigious institution of higher learning, and to those many faculty and friends whom I met there as an adjunct professor and director and co-founder of the University of San Francisco's Institute for Nonviolence and Social Justice, which continues to further Dr. King's legacy today. Luta continua.
Thank you, Dr. Jones. I want to stress again how grateful we are for you and for your work. I hope everyone watching this evening realizes that if your work can inspire even one person to go on and achieve meaningful change toward the advancement of civil rights and social justice, you have served a great purpose. I mean, even in the short amount of time I've gotten to interact with you, I want you to know that you have influenced me. You have inspired and contributed to my path too, and I am grateful. But I recognize hearing that from me may not be convincing enough to convey the importance of the message. So to close out our program, Dr. Jones, I am going to turn it over to someone else who you have inspired and poured into even before you ever met. It is my pleasure to welcome a great man who needs no introduction. This is a man who has been invited to speak at ABA events since he was a state senator, but only until now, and in honor of Dr. Clarence B Jones, did he choose to accept our invitation. If that isn't telling enough, I don't know what is. Without further ado, it is my great honor and privilege to welcome former President of the United States of America, Barack Obama, who will close us out.
Hi, everybody. I am honored to join you tonight as you present the Thurgood Marshall Award to Dr. Clarence B. Jones. When I was a young lawyer looking to make a difference, Dr. Jones was the ultimate inspiration. He was an attorney, a writer, an activist. He did it all. During the Civil Rights Movement, when those who were threatened by Dr. King tried to tarnish his reputation, it was Dr. Jones who joined a team of distinguished attorneys to fight back. When Dr. King was thrown in a jail cell in Birmingham, it was Dr. Jones who helped secure the money for his release. And as Dr. King prepared for the March on Washington, it was Dr. Jones who helped pen one of the most iconic speeches in history. Scripture tells us, as each has received a gift, use it to serve one another. Again and again, Dr. Jones used his extraordinary gifts to serve others, and in the process, helped bend the arc of history towards justice and freedom. Along the way, he became part of a generation of giants, men and women who recognized that the odds were stacked against them, but who pressed forward with courage, ingenuity, and resilience. Visionaries who endured the smack of billy clubs, the blast of fire hoses, and the solitude of jail cells, so that we might enjoy the freedoms that they were denied. Tonight, we celebrate one of those heroes. But I don't think Dr. Jones would be satisfied if we used this occasion to simply look backwards. Because if there's one thing that his story teaches us, it's that we cannot rest, not until justice rolls down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream. This past year has reminded us just how far we still have to go. But it's also reminded us that every generation of Americans has the ability to summon the same energy that drove Dr. Jones and so many others, and to make the promise of this country a little more real in our time. And as attorneys, you have a role to play in that fight. When you practice law, it becomes pretty obvious quickly that you're not always going to be Atticus Finch standing in front of a jury and demanding that justice be served. You're not always going to be Thurgood Marshall standing before the Supreme Court arguing about dismantling segregation. And too often, in fact, the law serves to regulate the affairs of the powerful instead of protecting the powerless. But the law is also memory. It records a long-running conversation, a nation arguing with its conscience. As lawyers, you can keep that conversation going, whether it's about how to guarantee every American the right to vote or how to eliminate racial bias in our criminal justice system. And you can reach back to give the next generation of lawyers a hand up, especially those who might not have access to the same resources or support systems that you did. In December, the Law School Admissions Council reported a 56% rise in applications to law school. Young people everywhere are seeing what's happening around them and trying to figure out how they can help. They're choosing optimism over cynicism, action over resignation. Let's do everything we can to give those young lawyers, one of whom could be the next Dr. Clarence B. Jones, every opportunity to succeed. And like Dr. Jones, let's do our part to leave them a world that's more equal and more just than the one we inherited. Thank you, and have a great night.